There is a specific kind of dread that comes with being caught inside a labyrinth. It is the feeling of moving through an institutional corridor where the rules are set by someone who actively wants you to fail. The anxiety stems from a total lack of leverage. You are operating in a jurisdiction where you have no legal standing, no allies, and no clear way out. 3,000 years ago, David, the man anointed to be king but currently running for his life, found himself in the center of this exact systemic pressure. Forced out of Israel by the corruption of King Saul, David flees into the wilderness. He crosses the border, hoping for safety, but instead enters the territory of a foreign enemy. This displacement leaves David completely exposed. He becomes a case study in how the biblical God operates when earthly, legal, and physical powers begin to close in. David seeks refuge in Gath. As the archaeological ruins of the city suggest, this was a fortified Philistine stronghold. It was also the hometown of Goliath, the champion David had famously killed years earlier. The recognition is instant. The local authorities identify David not as a refugee, but as a primary military threat, the champion of the very people they are currently at war with. Because he has crossed this threshold alone, David has no army to defend him and no diplomatic immunity to claim. He is a high-value target trapped in the heart of an enemy state. Confronted with this total lack of security, David experiences a profound and paralyzing fear. On a purely physical level, there are no remaining legal paths for survival. To live, David has to initiate a strategy that looks like a total collapse. Surrounded by enemies, David does not reach for his sword or attempt to negotiate. Instead, he begins to perform an act of severe insanity. At the city gate, the center of Philistine legal authority, David scratches meaningless marks on the doors and allows saliva to run down into his beard. This is a performance of inverted theater. David survives by shedding his royal dignity and assuming the role of a degraded, unthreatening fool. The tactic works. King Achish of Gath looks at David with contempt, misclassifies him as a useless madman, and dismisses him. On the earthly plane, David survives by intentionally neutralizing the system's interest in him. He stays alive by becoming something his enemies find beneath their notice. Biblical geography suggests a second layer here. Crossing into Gath meant entering a different spiritual jurisdiction, creating a legal opening. His survival depends on the heavenly courtroom. A divine boundary forms in the unseen realm, strictly prohibiting the enemy from destroying his calling. David's madness on earth mirrors this spiritual reality. By becoming a fool, he moves outside the category of a valid legal target for the territorial king. The humiliation was the mechanism of his preservation. The lower court dismissed him as mad, so the higher court could keep him alive. We see David's internal reflection on this event in Psalm 56, a text he wrote to interpret the meaning of his survival in Gath. He highlights a profound irony. While he was busy making frantic, crazy scratches on the wooden doors of an earthly gate, God was carefully recording the reality of his tears and his misery in a heavenly scroll. David appeals to the concept of a tear container, small clay vessels like these used to collect and track the weight of human sorrow. To the Philistines, David's performance was useless madness, but in the heavenly record, his suffering was treated as verified, sacred evidence of his trust in God. This pattern of survival through shame establishes a model that eventually leads to the person of Christ. Centuries later, Jesus would also be surrounded by hostile systems, mocked, spat upon, and treated as a fool by the ruling powers. On the cross, Christ utilized the same logic of inverted theater. He defeated the legal power of hostile cosmic forces, not through an army, but through total humiliation. This indicates a recurring truth in the biblical story. God does not always preserve us by shielding us from shame. He often preserves us by using that very shame to move us beyond the enemy's reach. Because of these two courtrooms, earthly systems operate under a sovereign limit. Your misery is on record, your life is held within a boundary, and the final verdict remains with the judge who hears the cry of the fool.